Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the NGO CSW66 Forum Parallel Event. My name is Moriko Hori. I'm the president of Women's Federation for World Peace Japan. I will be your moderator today. It's a pleasure to meet you all. Before we start the webinar, I would express my deepest condolences to the situation of Ukraine. As international organization, WFWP have colleagues and friends in Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. I strongly hope this situation will end soon. We have a few announcements to make. First, there will be translations from English to Japanese. So if you wish to listen to Japanese, please push the button below your screen. And if you have any question to today's speakers, please add into Q&A box. So let's start our webinar. WFWP was founded in 1992 and is an UN NGO in general consultative status with the ECOSOC UN that promotes women as an essential ingredient in creating a peaceful global society. Currently, there are 122 branch offices around the world, and we are addressing the unique issues and barriers in each region on the grassroots level and through high-level events. WFWP Japan is one of the branches, and we started international cooperation activities in 1994 and is currently developing more than 100 projects in 50 countries. Under the motto, One Global Family, WFWP provides various support for women and children of developing countries with the heart of a mother. As we are active in many countries, there are constant reports of natural disasters from all over the world. As many of you may know, Japan has been a victim of numerous natural disasters in the past. We're constantly struck by the marvels of nature, such as earthquakes, typhoons, and tsunamis. A while ago, Japan reached the 11th year from the Great East Japan earthquake, the strongest earthquake and the largest tsunami ever recorded in Japan. I'm sure many people remember as it was an unprecedented disaster. It was a disaster that showed how powerless human beings are when they face the violence of nature. It took the lives of 20,000 people, and 3,000 people still remain missing. Many people thought it may be difficult for the struck area to recover. However, the people of East Japan did not give up. There are no borders for environmental programs. People may be powerless in front of natural disasters, but we can prepare for it. Humans have played a huge role in the change in climate. Natural disasters often come when nobody is expecting them, and daily preparation and knowledge will determine the life and the death of people. As a country that has been the victim of numerous disasters in the past, I believe Japan has the mission of delivering the knowledge of disaster prevention and reduction to the world from our experience in the past. I am very grateful for the opportunity to deliver today's message around the world through the NGO CSW Forum. I hope this event will serve to protect our Earth and help protect the lives of many people. In terms of human security, I could say that there are lives that can be saved by having proper knowledge about disaster prevention. I wish today's event can be the opportunity to ring the alarm bell to all of you. Okay, so please join me in welcoming our first speaker. Mrs. Fujiko Paul is the president of WFWP Haiti. She is Japanese and she has lived in Haiti for 21 years. The theme of her speech is what Haitian women did in big disaster and fight against gender issues. Mrs. Paul will talk about how the Haitian woman dealt with the two major earthquakes that struck Haiti, as well as how they fought against gender issues. She will also report on how the funds sent from WFWP has helped the people of Haiti. So, Mrs. Fujiko Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, President Hori. First of all, I'm very honored to speak about Haiti at this opportunity of CSW66 parallel event. My name is Fujiko Paul, President of WFWP Haiti. I have lived in Haiti for 22 years. My husband is Haitian, and I am the mother of 3 children. At the time of our marriage, the political situation was insecure, and it was dangerous for a foreigner to walk around in the street. It was difficult to hold any activities, and with so many issues such as poverty, education, single mothers, and violence, I was struggling to figure out what kind of support we can provide. In 2003, the UN headquarters declared the United Nations Literacy Decade with the slogan of literacy as freedom. At the time, the literacy rate in Haiti was around 50%, the lowest in the American continent. The Haitian government was also working on improving the literacy rate, and my husband suggested supporting by opening a literacy classroom. To be honest, I was ignorant about what a literacy class was like. But when I thought about this, I realized that the reason waiters often refuse to sign their names on receipt or simply wrote across was because they cannot write their own name. The government was pleased about our literacy education project, and I myself started to feel hopeful for the future. In 2008, with the support of WFWP Japan, we borrowed the classroom of a nearby high school and started a free literacy class. 90% of the students were married middle-aged women. The women sold goods in big baskets on their head to support their family, and once they finished, they came to the classroom holding their notebooks tightly in their arms. These women were unable to attend school due to financial reasons or because their parents believed that there was no need for girls to study. In addition, since they were unable to read or write, they had a low social status and had a hard time in society, often disabled and oppressed by others. After attending the 6-month course, the women who had become able to do simple reading, writing, and calculation told us how grateful they were while shedding tears. I myself have been moved at how hard they study and was grateful that I met these wonderful women. Currently, young people in their 20s also come to the literacy class. When I hear them talk about how they have become able to post on Facebook, I realize the importance of the class, and now it has become my purpose of life. January 2010 was a big turning point for Haiti. A major earthquake of magnitude 7 attacked Haiti. It caused severe damage, including the death of more than 300,000 people on a small island with a population of 10 million. The capital Port-au-Prince was also in a catastrophic situation. I was inside a collapsed house at the time of the earthquake, but luckily I was able to escape. My eldest daughter, who was 6, was crushed under debris, but the local people risked their own lives to help, and she was miraculously rescued. Our family stayed at our backyard for the next 3 days. My second daughter was 6 months old at the time, so it was especially difficult to spend the night outside. However, through the experience, I feel that I was able to deeply understand the severe environment of Haitian people and feel emotionally closer to them. I temporarily returned to Japan with my 3 children to stay at my parents' house, but when I returned to Haiti 1.5 years later, I witnessed the damage which the earthquake has left on Haiti. One of the issues they were facing was cholera, which spread from the peacekeeping operations corps of the United Nations, which was infected with the disease. It quickly spread to the inhabitants, and over 800,000 people were infected and about 10,000 died. In addition, even after 1.5 years, many people continue to live in tents, which have become tattered. One of them told me how on rainy days they cannot sleep because the tent become flooded and they have to spend the night standing on blocks. Small children often cried inside the tent. The women on the campground were also suffering a serious problem of sexual assault by armed groups. There was no privacy in the tent or restroom, so some women were raped when they went to the restroom. There were also cases where armed men broke in tents at midnight and raped women in front of their children. One woman was raped while a man pointed a gun at her head. More than 250 cases of rape were reported during the 5 months after the earthquake. However, in many cases, the women do not report to the police. So it was terrifying to think about the actual number of women and girls who were raped. The reality is that even if they did report to the police, the sexual offenders will not be punished. In addition, the victim must pay an expensive attorney fee if they were to file a lawsuit, so they had no choice but to give up. Sexual crimes were not the only problem that women were facing after the earthquake. Soldiers from different countries who were dispatched for PKO became fathers during their stay, but they returned home leaving hundreds of children behind. The women had no choice but to become single mothers and live in disgrace and poverty. While they were still in the middle of recovering from the damage of the earthquake, Haiti was attacked by a huge hurricane in October 2016, which took the life of more than 1,000 people. With the repeated natural disasters, the people of Haiti who lost their houses, fields, jobs, and even family were pushed into an abyss of despair. However, while shedding tears, they still endured this tragic situation and started from zero once again. I wondered what motivated these people to be so strong, and decided to ask them. The women replied, even if today is very difficult, tomorrow will be a better day. I felt that they are always looking at the future. Recently, anti-government demonstrations have been frequently taking place in Haiti and have caused disorder on the street, such as commercial facilities being lit on fire and barricades being built everywhere. This led to the loss of access to water, fuel, and food supplies, and the function of the country has become paralyzed many times. In addition, the unstable political situation has caused a decline in public safety, and the number of gunfights and kidnappings by gangs have increased. In 2020, more than 800 kidnapping cases have occurred, and in 2021, the number increased so rapidly that the actual number of cases are unknown. The kidnapping of 17 American missionaries, which demanded a ransom of $17 million, shocked the people worldwide. Last year, there was also a shocking case in July, which the president was assassinated by an armed group. Not long after this incident, another big earthquake of magnitude 7.2 hit the southwestern parts of Haiti on August 14, 2021. This caused catastrophic damage, such as two mountains merging into one, and many people died from falling into collapsed roads. The national highway connecting the capital and the stricken area was occupied by a gangland war, which greatly affected the rescue operation and the transportation of supplies, and the difficult situation continued. In this hopeless circumstance, I was completely downhearted and could not understand why we are put into such difficulties. However, I was cheered up by watching the local people striving to live, and like the women said, I felt like I must find hope for tomorrow. Then, to my surprise, we really were able to find a ray of hope. We received inquiries from WFWP of various countries asking what kind of support we needed. Fortunately, WFWP Haiti held activities such as literacy classes in Port-au-Prince and Miragouane, and we are able to quickly reach the stricken area, which was close to Miragouane, to investigate the situation. We went around researching what the people needed the most. Of course, after a big earthquake, the people are in need of many things. But since we also experienced the earthquake in 2010, it was clear that what they will need most was the repairing of houses. With the support of WFWP Korea and WFWP Japan, we decided to start repairing the broken houses and also build a temporary housing with privacy, which was a strong request from the victim and the local staff, so that the women will not have to worry about being sexually assaulted. The victims who received the support of WFWP are very grateful and told us, while the government had given up on us, WFWP provided us with what we needed most. Before, I used to feel angry towards the people of Haiti who repeated violent demonstrations and crimes such as blackmailing and kidnapping using guns. However, one day my husband said to me, the Haitians have been given up by their parents, schools, and even the country, and grew up never receiving love. How could you who grow up in a blessed country like Japan understand the feelings? I was taken aback by these words. I realized what they really needed was a support based on true love like that of mothers. WFWP Haiti will continue to support and stand next to the local people who are always looking at the future. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Fujiko Paul, for your wonderful, wonderful report. Your report was very, in a way, shocking. And you told us the harsh reality, not only the natural disasters, but the following secondary damages caused by those disasters. It was unbelievable situation in Haiti. Thank you so much again. And I was very moved by the words that your final words that the motherly love, motherly care and motherly love is the key to heal the victims of Haiti. Thank you again so much for your wonderful presentation. Okay, we will have the Q&A session after the presentation of all speakers. So please send all your questions to the Q&A box. Let me introduce our second speaker. Mrs. Yuri Hosoya is the chair of Tokyo's 22nd District Federation of WFWP Japan. The theme of her speech is WFWP Care Packages of Love for Disaster Victims. Mrs. Hosoya will give a report on the Care Package of Love movement, which WFWP Japan has been working on in disaster-stricken areas since 2011. Bags filled with various support supplies like Lucky Bugs were named Care Package of Love and handed one by one to victims living in temporary housing. She will talk about the continued interaction between the victims and the importance of the bond between people. So, Mrs. Hosoya, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mrs. Hori. Hello, everyone. Please give me a moment to share my PowerPoint with you. I will be giving my presentation on WFWP's Care Package of Love activities on behalf of all the district federations in Japan that were involved in this effort. I would first like to explain what the Care Package of Love activities are. This activity was initiated by the Hiroshima District Federation in the wake of the Great East Japan earthquake and taken on by branches all over Japan to support victims in the affected areas. WFWP members prepared care packages with daily supplies and messages of encouragement to distribute to each temporary home. They visited the victims with these care packages to interact with them and empathize with their grief, pain, and anxiety. They knew it was important for the victims to feel the human bond as much as obtaining material supplies. The WFWP members also succeeded in involving their neighbors to provide supplies, thus acting as a bridge between those who wanted to help and those who needed it. Volunteers make visitations to temporary housing, which generally falls within the third stage after a disaster. These temporary homes are designed for maximum usage of 2 years, but this may be prolonged for a few years depending on the recovery speed of the area. The temporary homes are wooden or prefabricated and are built as multiple dwelling complexes far away from the disaster-stricken areas. Most temporary housing arrangements are about 2 DK in size and are not large enough for families with children. Other issues include shortage of food and other supplies. Their remote locations makes mobility very limited. The environment is not suitable for the elderly, and conflicts tend to arise among neighbors because the walls are thin and soundproofing inadequate. Following is the report on the support provided by WFWP Hiroshima through the care packages of love to victims of the Great East Japan earthquake. Please be aware that the slide that I will be showing now is depicting the tsunami scene when I talk about this Great East Japan earthquake. It's just one slide. As many of you know, the Great East Japan earthquake occurred on March 11th, 2011 at 2:46 p.m. It resulted in 18,425 deaths and people missing from the 12 prefectures in the Tohoku area, Northeast Japan. A total of 404,893 buildings and houses were destroyed, and even after 11 years, approximately 38,000 evacuees still cannot return to their hometowns. In April 2011, WFWP Hiroshima started their support activities when they heard that the victims were moving into temporary homes from evacuation centers. Members decided after some discussion that one of the first and foremost things they would need in temporary homes would be towels. They immediately collected towels, packed them in cardboard boxes, and sent them to the disaster-stricken areas. The towels were distributed inside the premises of the temporary housing complex with the cooperation of the local federation of WFWP Miyagi. They eventually organized 4 volunteer tours from Hiroshima, each time chartering a medium-sized bus to visit the temporary housing in Ishinomaki. About 20 people boarded the bus each time to distribute the care packages of love and other relief supplies. At the time, the National Support System took measures to free highways for support activities to the Tohoku area. During 4 months, volunteers delivered a total of 1,150 packages to victims. Hiroshima members soon received a request from a compassionate person who wanted them to help her donate a piano to a school in Tohoku when she learned about Iwaki City Toyoma Junior High School on TV. She used to play this piano for her deaf daughter. They ended up donating 2 pianos, and WFWP Hiroshima held a charity concert to cover the cost of shipping them. At the junior high school at Iwaki City, presentation ceremonies were held with all the students and the tour participants in attendance. In 2012, Hiroshima members encountered Ms. Tamami Sasaki, who had evacuated from Minamisanriku town in Miyagi to her parents' house in Hiroshima, and began support activities for Minamisanriku town. Minamisanriku town is known for Mrs. Miki Endo, who died on the day of the Great East Japan earthquake at the age of 24, while calling out to others to evacuate at the town's disaster prevention office. Miki's story, The Angel's Voice, was published and distributed to 1,250 elementary and junior high schools in the Saitama Prefecture. In November 2013, the WFWP volunteers stayed at the parents' house of Miss Miki Endo. In an effort to overcome their grief, Miki's parents decided to build a guest house on top of a hill in honor of their daughter, naming it Miki's house. They intend to convey the horror of the earthquake and the importance of disaster prevention to their guests. In July 2013, after the WFWP Music Festival was held in Sendai with intentions to heal the Tohoku area, they visited the Ishinomaki Temporary Housing Meeting Place with the choir groups of WFWP Hiroshima, Yamaguchi, and Hyogo. The visitors spent some unforgettable, precious moments together with the disaster victims, singing, laughing, sharing the grief and pain of the victims, encouraging each other, and constantly interacting with tears. Here are some comments from women who were living in the temporary homes of Ishinomaki. We were so grateful for the clothes and tableware that the volunteers brought us after we lost everything. We tried to create a cheerful atmosphere to overcome our grief by getting together and sewing handmade goods to sell at souvenir shops. We were very grateful for the heat pads distributed by volunteers, since the breakers at the temporary housing kept shutting down in the cold. It was difficult to be separated from those who won the lottery to move to disaster recovery housing. We sent them off with big hugs. The disaster recovery homes were disappointing because they were small and stark white, like a hospital, and too cold to withstand the winter of Ishinomaki. This is a letter of thanks from a victim in Ishinomaki City. I was seriously affected by the Great East Japan earthquake, being forced to escape from radiation. Separated from my family, relatives, and neighbors, my daily life was completely changed by this secondary man-made disaster. I was deeply moved to receive the heartwarming care packages of love from WFWP Hiroshima. Thank you so much. It is the caring and warm hearts of people like you that give us strength to move on in these trying times. Usage of temporary housing is usually limited to 2 years. After that, the victims move to disaster recovery housing, where WFWP support continues in other ways. An elementary school in Minamisanriku town has been asking Hiroshima every year to provide their newly enrolled students with school bags made of felt and handmade aprons. They also continue to provide supplies and personally interact with private soccer teams in the same town. In July 2019, the Minamisanriku Town's Board of Education superintendent, town council members, local ward mayors, and WFWP Hiroshima's 1st District Federation Secretariat held an online exchange meeting with those involved in the care package of love activities. The superintendent of education gave a detailed report on the situation of the children and acknowledged WFWP for its support. It was reported that evacuation drills caused some children to start crying, and they couldn't do any sea-related events for some time. Drills are being conducted like excursions now, but it has become more difficult to inform children of the beauty of nature in their hometown. Next, I have a report on the support provided by WFWP Japan towards victims of torrential rain in Western Japan. In July 2018, heavy rains in Western Japan caused by global warming resulted in flooding and landslides. In Hiroshima, 115 people were killed, 14,000 houses damaged, and a considerable number of prefectural, municipal facilities, medical institutions were affected, making municipal administration difficult and leaving the area isolated. WFWP first made effort to provide supplies for the residents at several temporary housing sites in Hiroshima City and Kure City. Winter clothes were greatly appreciated as the weather was getting colder in autumn. In April 2019, more care packages of love from WFWP members were delivered to the temporary housing residents who shared about their experiences at the time of the disaster. They heard how some residents felt insecure about going back to live in the area where they used to reside. Someone was even hospitalized from flashback and trauma of the disaster when it started raining in the area. The disaster victims were making effort to intentionally engage with one another to avoid isolation and to take care of one another's health. This last report is about the support provided by WFWP Fukuoka for victims of torrential rain in North Kyushu. Fukuoka Asakura Haki is a small but deeply damaged area by the heavy rain in North Kyushu, where houses were washed away and more than 1,000 people were affected. The district federations of WFWP Fukuoka have continued to visit the temporary housing there with the care packages of love for 2 years and interacted with the residents. There they met a member of the community building group called CAMP, started by 4 young people. CAMP is a group that supports areas that have lost their vitality after a disaster. They have been cultivating persimmons at an abandoned farm and needed manpower to harvest and to develop a sales route for them. WFWP members decided to extend some help in harvesting the beautiful and tasty persimmons. In closing, I would like to say that through WFWP's support activities on a nationwide scale, it is evident that women have much potential when it comes to helping others after a disaster. It is one thing to raise and send funds, but equally important to visit the devastated victims with words of encouragement. Even though Japan is more fortunate compared to other countries, where people may not be able to evacuate to such temporary shelters with electricity and water, the devastation that victims experience is the same. The horror of losing everything in a single moment due to a natural disaster is tremendous, and the survivors have no choice but to face the future with deep anxiety. Volunteers that continued to visit the disaster victims for many years noticed how they begin to express gratitude with open hearts as the years go by. Many members felt that they were the ones being encouraged and loved through the activities of delivering the care packages of love instead of the victims. Japan is not exempt from the effects of the global climate change that has been causing these unprecedented disasters. We will continue our work to encourage women in the affected areas and accelerate the speed of disaster recovery. We will do our best to keep on keeping on. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mrs. Yuri Hosoya, for your detailed reports about the support activities for disaster victims. I think your speech taught us that women have potential for supporting victims of disaster-stricken areas. We also learned that even if the disaster-stricken area recover from natural disasters, there remains trauma in people's mind, and I think continuous supports are needed. So thank you so much again. Okay, now let me introduce today's main speaker. Professor Akiko Yamanaka is the president of International Tsunami Disaster Prevention Society. She is the senior diplomatic fellow of Cambridge Central Asia Forum, Cambridge University, and the special ambassador for the World Tsunami Awareness Day of Japan. Today, she will talk about social resilience from humans to infrastructure, lessons learned from Japan. Social resilience is defined as the ability of certain groups of group or community for dealing with external stress and disturbance caused by social, political, or environmental change. The disaster prevention measures established through the many natural disasters that occurred in Japan are something that should be shared with the rest of the world. Professor Yamanaka will explain about social resilience to enhance disaster prevention in areas and communities. So let's welcome Professor Yamanaka. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction, President Hori. Ladies and ladies, when I attended the UN Decade of Women's Conference in Nairobi, Kenya in 1985, the theme was women and gender equality. The Secretary General of the conference, Letishina Shahani, gave the most impressive speech. She said, "Peace is not a situation where there is no war. It is women who can teach our children the reality of war and peace as genuine teachers. True development is social, cultural, and political, as well as economic. Equality between men and women is not simply the absence of discrimination. Rather, equality means granted women the right, opportunity, and responsibility to take part in their own development. We women need a comprehensive perspective when we realize gender equality." I would like to talk about tide of history as endemic problems, racial religious conflicts, drugs, terrorism, weapons of mass destruction, infectious diseases, and so on. As regional problems, piracy, oil spills, financial crisis, cyber terrorism, scramble for natural resources. As political instability, Brexit, revival of hegemonism during post-world democracy, but of course, we have to maintain the rule of law, human rights, equality, and freedom. As increasing frequency of natural disasters due to climate change, as President Hori mentioned, earthquake, tsunami, flood, drought, forest fires, eruption, tornado, hurricane, typhoon, cyclone, and so on. According to Swiss Re, losses from natural disasters amounted to $306 billion in 2017 alone. As aging society, strains on medical services and healthcare, labor shortage, and so on. Now we are going to move to preventive diplomacy. The theory of preventive diplomacy can be applied to the prevention of natural as well as human-induced disasters. Given these realities, if we are to have any hope of changing the world dependence on war to resolve disputes, it is very important to revisit the concept of value of preventive diplomacy. The prevention of both natural and human-induced disasters should be rooted in preventive diplomacy and predicated on non-violent means applied to resolving international conflicts. And these methods should be used whenever possible as a first resort. However, if it doesn't work, we have to step in. This concept can be applied for natural disasters as well as pandemic like COVID-19. In its simplest form, preventive diplomacy can be best explained by breaking it down into 4 stages. 1, war conflict. 1, preventing conflict from breaking out. 2, preventing conflict from expanding. 3, promoting ceasefires that stop the conflict to enable recovery. 4, preventing the resumption of hostilities. As you know, more than 40% of current conflict in the world are recurring. Regarding natural disasters, 1, preparing for natural disasters before they happen. 2, rescuing victims quickly. 3, recovering from the disaster. 4, focusing on reconstruction that reduce risk in the event of another disaster. As infectious diseases control, 1, preventing asymptomatic spread. 2, infection prevention through social measures. 3, eradication of new infections. 4, preventing the spread of recurring or new diseases. I believe in Japanese saying, be prepared and you will have no regret. 備えあれば憂いなし. Now I would like to explain about lessons learned. We suffered immensely after the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami of 2011. By 10th of September 2018, the number of the deaths reached 18,432 and 2,536 more were missing. The cause of death for 90.6% of the people was drowning. Furthermore, about 73,000 are still displaced and 402,704 houses, buildings collapsed. After this Great East Japan earthquake, men were much more likely to commit suicide than women. Therefore, women must encourage male friends, colleagues, as well as female friends, colleagues, to be more resilient at the time of a disaster. However, we may have suffered even more after the Great Hanshin Awaji earthquake in 1995, 6,434 deaths, 70% of them crushed to death. Due to legal restrictions, we learned a lot about legal bindings from this natural disaster. As an elected member of the Japanese Diet, I worked hard to improve various laws and regulations. Here are some of the cases I worked on. Enable laws. The Great Hanshin Awaji earthquake was happened in 1995, as I said. The first one is quarantine of detection dogs. The British emergency rescue team arrived in Kobe with detector dogs within 24 hours after the Great Hanshin Awaji earthquake. However, the team could not use the dogs because the law required for the dogs to be quarantined for 6 months. After the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami on 11th March in 2011, on the other hand, 46 detection dogs from 9 countries, Korea, Singapore, Germany, Switzerland, Mexico, Australia, USA, UK, and Netherlands, were unleashed immediately and returned their own countries by March 27th, 2011, after the mission was completed. The second example is the Foreign Doctors Medical Practitioners Law. Many medical doctors from overseas came to Japan to help the wounded, but because they did not have Japanese medical licenses, they could only serve as support staffs. At the same time, offers of sending medical teams from the governments of Greece, Slovakia, Bangladesh, Yemen, Cuba, Poland, Yugoslavia, UK, Korea, China, and Thailand were rejected by Japanese government because only doctors who possesses medical doctor's license of Japan could provide medical treatment. With this, the Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare announced the acceptance of those nations' states' offers as special and exceptional cases on 23rd January, 5 days after the disaster. Furthermore, at the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami, medical units from Israel, Jordan, Thailand, and the Philippines were immediately accepted while 40 other nation states offered to send medical units. The third example is the Road Traffic Act. This is a law to keep private cars off the roads in case of emergency or disaster. After the Great Hanshin-Awaji earthquake, there were many fires, especially in Kobe, because the earthquake happened while people were preparing breakfast. Many fire engines and ambulances from neighboring prefectures tried to reach the disaster area, but could not, because the roads were jammed with private cars trying to escape from Kobe. The laws were amended and applied before the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami 16 years later. In addition to the laws above, the earthquake resident building standards were upgraded to withstand greater earthquake intensity from intensity 5 to intensity 6. By 2017, 95.6% of elementary and junior high schools in Japan had been upgraded to these standards. Every country must review its disaster-related laws. Then I'm going to move to awareness raising. There were the programs pointed out just before the Great East Japan earthquake. In 2010, I introduced these warnings at the International Disaster Prevention Conference in Berlin as a keynote speaker. And unfortunately, these warnings happened actually in 2011. One, people forget how devastating tsunamis are as years pass. People get used to warning and tend to ignore them. Major breakwater seawalls built along the coast make residents feel complacent. We should keep these issues in mind, not only in relation to tsunamis, but also for other natural disasters. Excuse me. Sorry. We must educate the public and take preventive and mitigate measures before it risks. In Japan, elementary school teaches children how to protect themselves from disasters, especially from earthquakes. Now I would like to move to infrastructure. To mitigate disaster, we need infrastructure, but we should revisit its function and purposes. Seawalls in tsunami area, for example, are usually high concrete walls that prevent people from enjoying the beautiful scenery. Many severe arguments were discussed regarding the huge seawalls after the Great East Japan earthquake in 2011. At the same time, new inventions with high technology have been practiced. Therefore, today I will introduce the following three challenges. 1, multipurpose seawalls. 2, smart city. 3, floating vehicles. The challenges of multipurpose seawalls have been practiced after the Great Kanto earthquake in 1923. Atami City was attacked by the Great Kanto earthquake tsunami, and it took more than 20 years to build the 12 meters high multipurpose seawall, and it is not completed yet. The economy has recovered somewhat today thanks to the new multipurpose seawalls that stretches along the seacoast, which Shizuoka Prefecture planned to build in cooperation with Atami City and related ministries of Japan. Multipurpose seawall in Atami contributes to the citizens' multilateral activities. This will attract tourists as well as citizens during the firework festival. Everyone can take a walk on the wide wooden deck attached to the seawall on the seaside. There is also an event space with an outdoor stage on the backside of the seawall on the town side, and many types of performances are carried out, attracting many people. It also provides a footpath in Braille. Wheelchair slope and even public car parking under the three-layered seawall. The most important element of the success of this long-range overall seacoast building plan can be explained with the following 3 points. First, Shizuoka Prefecture provides questionnaire survey periodically for citizens and policy evaluation from related ministries. Second, transparency of information and data. And third, analysis of cost effectiveness. I would like to move to Smart City. Smart City is an urban area that efficiently manages use of various data collected by IoT technologies. The concept of smart city started from the effective use of power grids for renewable energy resources through smart meters and an online control system. Now it includes not only the electric consumption by power meters, but also traffic flow rate by velocity sensors among the garbage, in amount of the garbage of the container, as well as weather and water levels. The data collected from the various sensors can be used for prevention and mitigation during a disaster as well. For example, it can make evacuation recommendations for people based on real-time data of the water levels. When a disaster strikes, drones used for maintenance for infrastructures may be launched to take pictures of the various areas of a city to get a clear look at the situation. A smart city is also capable of the efficient use of limited resources in the recovery phase, along with providing information of shelters and transportation teams. Citizens will be able to get a safer and more comfortable life if we can combine numerical simulation and smart city solutions. Now I'd like to move on floating vehicles. I hope you have heard of that, but most of the deaths caused by the tsunami disaster in the 2011 earthquake of the Pacific coast of Tohoku was drowning. The ARCA project. ARCA is named after Noah's Arks. And our member of the International Tsunami Disaster Association is working on this, named ARC. And this ARC project has started to develop to reduce the number of deaths caused by drowning during a tsunami. ARC will have the capability to protect people from being crushed by debris in the sea, and also low temperatures, and surviving up to 72 hours before rescue arrives. One good candidate is a bus. If a bus can stay afloat for several days, handicapped people, infants, sick, old, and pregnant people and the people left behind can get on the bus and try to their fortunes to survive in the most severe conditions of a tsunami disaster. The additional cost of the remodeling for a floatable vehicle can be as low as 10% of the original cost of the bus. In Netherlands, floating houses and buildings are developed, and Netherlands for actual use, and Netherlands and Japan technology can help the people, whoever they are, to have a risk of water disaster. And I would like to tell you, do not build a house down below. This word was written on the board, on a very old board, about 100 years ago, and saved the lives of the village people who did not build house down below. So I would like to say, look at the face of the land. What is the nature of the land? Is it sand? Is it wet one? Or is it deep carving? Or is it on the mountain or whatever? Please look at the face of the land and look at the history of the land. What kind of natural disaster has attacked at the land? What kind of preparation does so far for this disaster? Prepare for the possible natural disaster. What kind of preparation is needed for the next disaster according to the face of land and history of land? So this 100 years old board is a kind of legacy of Japanese people's disaster. I'd like to point out 3 key phrases in order to make the world community safer and more peaceful. In order to achieve gender equality and SDGs number 5 after COVID-19 era, the following 3 key phrases should be remembered. 1, ensuring social resilience. A simple glance at the world map of conflict leaves most of us simply speechless. At the same time, natural disasters as well as the risks of pandemics like COVID-19 are increasing year on year. Therefore, we have to consider how to ensure the resilience of society, both from the perspective of human well-being and the requirements of the physical and social infrastructure which we will need to create to ensure it. Second point is addressing common interests. When we look at the world at this moment, most developed nation states have tried to establish multilateral rules that ally with common interests. But if on the global stage, only the strong win at bilateral negotiations, no one else in this complicated, interconnected world will survive. Even the winner will suffer a backlash as common interests reassert themselves in a boomerang effect. The urgent need to spread the concept of protection, common interests, to the leaders who do not yet realize its importance is underlined. Third one is establishing an age of balance. I believe it is important to recognize that the 21st century must be the age of balance. The struggle for balance is being waged on an international, state, and even individual level between dichotomies of competing values. They include development, environment protection, globalization, regionalization, high-tech information, individual privacy, group orientation, individualism, work, leisure, materialism, spiritualism, male, female, military solutions, non-military alternatives, national interests, international interest, in other words, common interest, and even protection of lives from COVID-19, protection of economics. I just wanted to share with one perspective of Harvard University's economic professor, Galbraith. I met him 3 times. He said, when I met him for the first time in 1994, when I was professor of the university, he said, Akiko, Japan and the US have succeeded to produce excellent products. However, it is doubtful if we can succeed to produce real happy people. So we have to really think of who are real happy people. When I met him in 1997, when I became the member of the parliament, or the Diet in Japanese, then he said, because you are the Diet member, you have to really think of 21st century. There are 3 issues in 21st century. 1, the program of the rich and poor. 2, nuclear issues. 3, traditional discrimination, race, religion, nationality, skin of color, and even the gender. And we are now in 21st century, and his words are now really we can see as a reality. In closing, I would like to introduce the words of Aristotle, who is a Greek philosopher 2,000 years ago, which I encountered at Cambridge University when I was a visiting professor in 2012. It is more difficult to organize peace than to win a war, but the fruits of victory will be lost if the peace is not well organized. If you listen to this, how much progress the human beings made for the last 2,000 years. I believe that the secret weapon to change the world community more peaceful is us women. Last but not least, let us pray for peace in Ukraine together. I thank you very much, and I hope that we can have some discussion time. So I just skip a few things, but we can really discuss many things more. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Yamanaka. Today we're so lucky to have a specialist like you to our event. We learn very precious lessons directly affect life and death. I hope these knowledge and experience can contribute to disaster prevention and mitigation in many other areas of the world. Thank you again for your wonderful speech. Okay, Now we are going to have Q&A session. I received five questions in our Q&A box, but I also received some questions. Okay. So we have all our wonderful speakers on the screen. Thank you so much. And let me open this Q&A box. Okay, I guess let me ask first questions to Mrs. Fujiko Paul. In Haiti, is disaster education widespread for women and children? Can you answer this question, Mrs. Paul? Please unmute yourself. Yes.
Yes. So Haitian people, so even if today is very difficult, tomorrow will be a better day. So they believe that like this word. So even difficulties is no problem. They can always move forward. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Paul. Okay, the second question is to Mrs. Osoya. Let me read the question. Today's presentation was mainly about the care package of love activities in Hiroshima and Kyushu. Were other areas like Tokyo involved as well? Please unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me? Yes, actually, I'm not aware of all of the district federations that were involved because there were so many that I know. But I know that even in Tokyo, many district federations were involved in preparing the care packages of love. Well, after the Great East Japan earthquake, Tokyo was also damaged severely. So it was difficult for people of Tokyo as well. But even then, many members and neighboring people were willing to donate supplies to put in those bags. And I know some districts even sewed their own packages with different materials. Very beautiful packages came out of those. And I also asked my neighbors to donate supplies, and they were more than willing to do so. And we sent them off to the Tohoku area. I also know of a branch in Tokyo who donated funds to replace windows that were broken in Fukushima, in a school in Fukushima. And also my friend who lives in Iwate, they were also damaged severely, but they also went to the temporary homes to deliver the packages of love sent from all over the nation. So just those that I know of tell you that the entire nation was involved in this activity. And I really feel that women are always willing to help, no matter what, even if they're in a severe situation themselves. And so women are going to be the ones to save the world.
Whoa, thank you. Thank you so much for detailed answer, Mrs. Soya. Okay, the next question is for Mrs. Yamanaka. Please give advice how developing countries such as Haiti can start to realize social resilience.
Thank you, Miss Holly, Mrs. or Miss or whoever.
Mrs.
President Holly. We don't use Miss or Mrs. So just Holly-san. Thank you very much. I have been to Haiti twice as a Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs to support Haiti's government. And at that time, I found out, first, President and Prime Minister, those high top people, at that time, they don't have so-called ownership. They really require the support from everywhere. So I told them that you have to try to stand on your own foot so that we can help. Otherwise, we cannot really continue to support you forever. So that is what first that the leaders needed. And for example, I found out that Haitian people is very artistic. They draw beautiful pictures, drawings, and also stained glass and beautiful art figures. So that's why I think that that's something the government can really organize to find out the artists and try to really give the chance to them. But otherwise, at that time, US and other rich countries, people come and then buy it for cheap price. So that's why it's really difficult for them to really get money. So that's why I think that's one thing. And second thing is education. And I hope that by now, the elementary school, public elementary school can provide all the education for every children. When I visited, only private schools can really have the opportunity to attend. That is only 10% rich people. So I think that education is very, very important. So that is something that we Japanese can help in many ways, and including disaster prevention classes, which Japanese school provide, as I told you, provide how to escape from earthquake. And I think that Haiti is also, if you look at your own land, or the disaster experience, of course, natural disaster, but especially earthquake is very, very severe. So I hope that these two things, education for children, so that they can learn and they can really stand by themselves in the future, and the top leaders should have the ownership, because there is a lot of hope if you can use your own, I think that fortunes that you have, not only the natural resources, but also the people. If this can be contributed, that will be very, very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kiko Yamanaka, for a detailed answer. Unfortunately, since time is limited, we're going to ask last question. Let me see. I think the last question is in Japanese. Let me read in Japanese. 日本では I think this question is also for Professor Yamanaka. I will read this question in Japanese, and can you answer in English? Sorry. 日本では地震警報が鳴りますが、世界のどの国も災難の、これは震災ですかね、の先に予見する技術の世界で、ちょっと日本語は難しいですね。世界でこういう協力体制はありますか という質問ですね。
Thank you very much for the very good question. It's very difficult to answer because if you say the world, which part of the world we can refer, because it's really different from nation to nation, because natural disasters are different from nation to nation. If I can quote in a very short minutes about the nuclear power stations prevention in California, because the US had suffered 3 mile, I think that nuclear station really exploded. After that, the nation decided to have the main points of the community, which really can have real detailed evacuation system. For example, in California, and when there is a nuclear station is over there, then all the stakeholders, that's government, police, fire station, and also the people have periodically the meeting. And where is the people who are disabled? Where is the people who have a baby? And all these ones, if you say something like you don't have privacy, that's it. But I think that should be very much important. So that's why who is going to take care of this person if something happens? And also the silence is very strong silence is going to tell you that if it's 3 silence, you have to shelter yourself. Don't go out. And if 5 silence, then you have to escape. And where to go is already in the map. And there is a calendar, and everything, single things like you have to come here to really escape, or you can really use this kind of transportation, and all the details are on the calendar. So if you forget where to go, you can really look at the calendar, and every house have a big calendar, and it says everything. And also silence are extremely high. And these are all centralized to the center pillar, which is governed by the federal government. So when I saw the 2011, the Fukushima Daiichi, unfortunately, Japan has 52 nuclear power stations, but there is no such kind of things. And when I asked the question 1999, when I came back from the US to really see this kind of evacuation system, and I asked the question at the diet, the answer is, please do not wake up the sleeping boy. Do you understand what it means? Don't make the people realize that nuclear power station is sometimes dangerous, but because the government always said, this is safe, this is safe, this is safe. So I was told by the top of the political statue that please do not wake up sleeping boys. And now I hope, unfortunately that happened, but I think that every nation states have to realize, on the other hand, like Germany and other countries. And Japan also, many municipal government and the people around there started to really think how to protect ourselves. So hopefully the government, a national government, should have more leadership to organize and to gather the stakeholders and the transparency of the data and transparency of actual things, and to tell what to do, not just tell, to really write, and then everybody can read it whenever they need it. So we are on the way.
Thank you again, Professor Akiko Yamanaka. I think you just made a bomb remarks about nuclear facilities. But anyways, I think each country need Professor Yamanaka. Yes, definitely. So thank you, everyone. So thank you, audience, for your questions. I would like to close Q&A session. Apologies if you don't get to your question. Thank you so much, speakers. Thank you so much, everyone. Okay, let's conclude this session. This has been a truly meaningful time, but it is coming to an end. Today's parallel event was held with the theme of climate change and women. Mrs. Fujiko Paul gave a speech about natural disaster of Haiti and the situation of the victims. Mrs. Yuri Hosoya reported about the victim support of WFWP Japan. As the main speaker, Mrs. Sakiko Yamanaka spoke about social resilience. It's so hard to pronounce. Social resilience from humans to infrastructures, lessons learned from Japan. Each speech was very shocking, but at the same time, very educational. I felt that what was common through all the speakers was preparing and knowing. Those two words are the key for this event. Natural disasters cannot be controlled, but humans are creating the factor of climate change. Today, we learn about the importance of making the effort of protecting the global environment, and also how disaster prevention can save the lives of many people, as well as what kind of care is needed after disaster occurs. Learning from today's valuable lessons, I feel that each of us should have the mindset of global citizens. I hope this event became an opportunity to stimulate our minds. Thank you, everyone, for your time today. And this will end our parallel event. Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.